the brain is actually a muscle, right? So much like your physical skeletal muscles, it needs a workout.
What is the data on how or if diet sodas, aspartame, and other artificial sweeteners affect brain health? So let me know.
Okay. The thing with the brain and alcohol is that alcohol can stay in your central nervous system for up to 3 weeks.
But I'm thinking, Sarah, why don't we do a little rapid fire round on supplementation?
Okay.
Alrighty, hello everybody. Looks like everybody's getting let in from the waiting room here. Well, super excited for what we have going on today. This is our first neuro Q&A with our lovely neuro specialist, Sarah Yambrick. So we're going to dive right in, but before we do that, quick introductions. You've probably seen me before. My name is Courtney Van Bussum. I am here along with Shannon Mullen. We're going to be your hosts today. My role at BLI, I oversee a lot of our strategic initiatives and some of our new product development. And Shannon is our lovely clinical liaison. She works closely with our providers and then our back office staff to make sure everything runs smoothly. So if you have ever talked to her on the phone, it's because she's probably trying to get you scheduled and Dr. Youth's very busy schedule. And then I'll let Sarah introduce herself in a second, but I do want to do our quick disclaimers before we get too deep in. So if you've not been at a Q&A before, if you have questions that pop up during the session, go ahead and submit those through the Q&A section below here on the Zoom. If you have just a comment, you can put it in the chat, but we're typically watching the Q&A for those questions to pop up. And we do have a lot of questions today, so we're probably not even going to get through all of them that we had submitted in advance. But if your question pops up in the flow of the conversation, we'll try to answer it. Otherwise, we will definitely be doing more of these because this seems to be very popular. And then lastly, this is educational only and here to provide general information, not meant to serve as medical advice. So we're not going to be able to answer anything specific to your medical care, your medical needs, but obviously you can come see us and Sarah at BLI. All right, so that's out of the way. So Shan, you want to kick us off?
Yes, let's dive in. So as Courtney mentioned, we're super excited to introduce you to our resident neuro specialist, Sarah Yambrick. So for those of you who have not yet had the pleasure of meeting Sarah, she joined BLI a year ago, almost to date today, to help us build out a full suite of neuro and brain focused services. So of course we know the brain is a very important part of overall health. So we felt it was critical to bring someone to BLI whose passion could be applied to our clients in a dedicated and focused manner. So we're really lucky to have Sarah. Her depth of knowledge and passion for the brain and neurology is remarkable. So thank you for being here. We're so excited to do this Q&A. I just wanted to say, fun fact too, Sarah is the queen of really cool earrings and shirts.
Yes.
If you
my stormtroopers.
Oh yes.
Yeah, to go with my Clone Wars shirt. It's always a theme.
Yes, if you missed it, she actually did take a vote on the theme of today. So next one, look out for that if you want to vote on the theme. So yes, wanted to draw attention. That's super fun. So before we get to the question, Sarah, do you want to just take a quick minute and share how your journey and how you got here and a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so I mean the Cliff Notes version, just 2015-ish, somebody gave me a book called The Brain That Changes Itself. It was actually a regular of mine at this bar that I was managing, and I just got chills. It like blew my mind to such a degree that I became completely obsessed with neuroscience, to the point where the joke is that I cheated on my boyfriend and then left him for neuroscience at the time, which is very true.
Yes.
It's exactly what happened. I couldn't start at school yet, so I started volunteering at Craig Hospital, ended up spending almost 3 years there, working with them on various research projects too, as well as working in the Peak Fitness Center, doing all kinds of different occupational physical therapies. Then I graduated, I went to CSU for cellular molecular neuroscience, graduated, with my degree focusing on traumatic brain injuries and neurodegenerative disorders. And then I got a job here at BLI, where I continue to specialize in traumatic brain injuries and neurodegenerative disorders.
Amazing. I'm so glad you're here. So we have a lot of questions, so let's go ahead and kick it off. The first question came from Christy, and Christy wanted to know your thoughts on brain health and menopause.
So it was actually a really great question. I love this question because the thing about menopause is that it's the general thing about it is that it's a reduction in estrogen. Estrogen actually plays a huge role in these very important brain networks, specifically the default mode network, which plays into sort of our sense of self, our awareness of self and an environment, right? So when these estrogen signals or receptors start to get decreased during menopause, you get things like brain fog or memory issues or sleep disturbances because all of a sudden you're not getting those same connections about your environment and where you are within your environment, right? Then there's also estrogen receptors associated with your sleep-wake cycle. Very important neurotransmitters like serotonin and acetylcholine. So that is part of the reason why you end up getting these really weird sleep disturbances. So, which is not good for the brain. Sleep is incredibly important. It's how we get rid of toxic proteins. So during menopause, or when you're going through menopause, it's important to come see somebody like, Emily, our PA here, or listen to Doctor's podcast and try to get on some hormones to help stabilize that so that you're not getting those infrequent oscillations that can actually disrupt these networks. And then that will also help improve things like brain fog and memory, and then decrease your stress associated with having brain fog and memory loss or sleep disturbances.
Yes.
Just a follow up to that, Sarah, just for our male listeners as well. I mean, because there's the estrogen side and then there's the progesterone and sleep and how sleep's related to the brain. Can you just speak a little bit to broadly, for our male and female, but hormones and the brain and when those hormones start to drop beyond just the estrogen side?
Yeah. Funny enough, hormones actually have a huge influence on your delta wave sleep. So when you have an imbalance of other hormones like progesterone or DHEA, it will cause a disruption to your sleep. You won't be able to actually get deep sleep because you're not getting those big delta wave oscillations because of that imbalance due to hormones. And hormones in general with brain health, hormones are such a funny little signal because we always think of them as just like sex related things, but they have a huge pocket in almost everything we do, from appetite to sleep to emotional regulation. All of these things get affected when hormones are out of whack. So it's important to get those checked, especially the older that you get and they start to decrease production. Sorry.
No, that makes total sense. I think, it's a great question to start with just because we always like Dr. Earth has done, her course, What to Fix First. And you have to look at, people will say, oh, well, sleep more. If you sleep more, then that will help your brain, that'll help everything. Well, if you don't have hormones on board to then do all the brain functions that you need, then you won't be able to sleep. So I think that's a really fair point to call out.
Yeah.
Well, we had quite a bit of questions. So, we know the brain's connected to so many things, pretty much everything. So we'll dive right into some tips and tricks because we had quite a few questions about what can we do to keep the brain sharp. So we talked about hormones, but we had a question here from Kathy. She said, living in California, other than peptide therapy, bioidentical hormones, and semaglutide, what other interventions can I use to help with brain sharpness? So I think we'll dive into peptides later and hormones we talked about, but what kind of, brain training or other exercises should people be aware of?
Well, I think it gets lost in translation that the brain is actually a muscle, right? So much like your physical skeletal muscles, it needs a workout. So yes, all of these peptides and supplements are super helpful, but your brain still needs to utilize them, right? Drinking a protein shake is healthy for your muscles, but you're not going to get any muscle gain unless you go work them out. So it's important to actually work the muscle. So if you're doing these, that's awesome. They're great supportive mechanisms, but you also got to do the work. So reading, learning something new, like a language, that's brilliant, especially for your memory. It's great for your hippocampus. Or teaching somebody something, that's another amazing way to like help, establish neuroplasticity and grow your brain, work that muscle. Exercise, of course, is important, not just for your muscles, but for your brain as well. It helps release all kinds of good, healthy chemicals and decrease inflammation, which can cause a lot of problems, and we'll talk about that later. But doing fun puzzle games and challenging yourself on something new.
Yeah, I was actually just telling the girls before we hopped on, I just recently discovered a new brain puzzle setup, and I was doing it the other day. And thank God I came in younger than my brain, but it was really hard. It was a good workout for the brain. So I think, especially now, there's so many tools and so many things online just to do puzzles, or I know you would put, Sudoku and crosswords and things like that. My grandfather did crosswords literally every day for his entire life, and lived quite long with a healthy brain.
And a big fan favorite, pickleball.
Oh yeah. Well, because it's trying to increase your reaction time is something that comes up a lot with my patients. And so that's one of the things that I realized is actually good in so many different ways, because it's joyful, it's super fun, and it helps increase your reaction time. So it's a total like win-win scenario.
Yeah,
Yeah.
social, reaction time, exercise, love it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we did have a question from Emma pop up asking about Mendy, which is an at-home neurofeedback. So I'm going to hold that question, Emma. We're going to talk about neurofeedback kind of towards the end. But I don't know, Sarah, are you familiar with Mendy much?
Mendy, you have to spell it for me. Sorry.
MEND. Yeah, it looks like a at-home neurofeedback. So we'll talk about
Oh
neurofeedback.
yeah. Okay.
We also had a couple questions. I mean, I guess kind of on the same vein, if you wanted to just share any apps or things that you know of that are your favorites when it comes to sort of brain teasers and brain help games.
So Luminosity is always the one I mention first, because it has a mixed bucket of things that it'll do on a daily basis, and it'll only do it for like a certain amount of time a day. So it only slots you for like, I think 20 minutes, but it'll give you either one game or 3 games in a row that you have to do or like complete. And I like it because it allows for your brain to, have a muscle switch. So then instead of doing something that's very analytical, you're doing something that has to do with reaction time. Like they have a little go-kart race where you have to like dodge tumbleweeds and stuff. I think it's super fun. He knew, which is awesome. It's actually when one of our CCCs here, Lauren, actually told me about it. So it's an app to help you learn something new, right? And there's different subjects that you can pick. I'm actually like a huge fan of it now. So I'm super happy she gave me that suggestion before we did this. Elevate, it's supposed to help with word memory, right? So like word finding, word recall, sentence comprehension, but it will start off by grading your ability, right? So it'll start off matching where you're at and then help you gain as you go forward, which is super helpful for some of my patients that have Broca's aphasia or Winneker's and, struggle with reading comprehension still. So that's like big fan. Cryptogram's just really fun. But it helps you memorize, what letter matches with a number to build a word or a sentence. They're all like pop culture stuff. So I'm good at it, but also I'm not good at it. Like Hasta La Vista came up and I failed out of that one. Like, I don't know, 6 times. And I got so angry and I asked my boyfriend and he goes, yeah, Hasta La Vista. And I was like, what?
I'll have to check that one out. I'm not familiar with any of these, so I'm excited to look them up.
Yeah, and I just like Sudoku because it's a really good challenge, right? It's a number challenge versus a word challenge.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I haven't played enough with all of these, so agreed.
Yeah.
We did have a question from Diane, are there foods or diet that are helpful to the brain? I think people, have probably heard the term brain foods and maybe blueberries or things like that, but can you speak a little bit to diet's role and what you should be looking for from kind of brain boosting foods?
Brain boosting foods, always go for healthy fats and protein. Things with that are heavy in omega-3s. It could be anything from fish to, half an avocado or whole avocado throughout the day. And then things that are like really helpful for inflammation, like ginger or blueberries. Like these things can help, for lack of a better term, insulate the brain so that when you do have excitation in a normal functioning way, you get happy about something, um, you're cushioning your brain's ability to actually move through that in a healthy fashion, right? So healthy fats and protein help build and maintain synaptic connections. So it's very important. And amino acids, making sure you're getting all of your amino acids, things like leucine and theanine and are all very important. If it's good for your skeletal muscle, it's probably good for your brain. They go very hand in hand as far as like the nutrients that they use.
Mm.
Yeah, I think an important point, and probably hopefully our BLI community who's been following us for a while has heard us talk about healthy fats and cholesterol and how your brain actually is a massive consumer of cholesterol, right? And this whole conversation of reduce your cholesterol, reduce your cholesterol. Well, if you don't have enough cholesterol on board, then your brain actually doesn't have enough fats and energy to pull from. And so I think that's something we get frustrated here at BLI a lot is, people will see a traditional doctor and they get put on a statin to reduce their cholesterol. Well, if all your other biomarkers are looking good and your cholesterol, I think, what did we say? Like above 200, in that 200 to 240 range is actually really your ideal cholesterol, right? And that way you have enough fats on board and enough cholesterol to feed the brain.
Yeah, well, and cholesterol also has a lot to do with your phospholipid bilayer that goes around your cells, right? So it gets embedded in that and creates good fluid structure, which is what you need. You don't want a rigid little ball. There's no processing involved with that, right? Nothing's going to get in or out. So cholesterol actually helps keep membrane fluidity. So if you don't have that, then you don't have that. It can actually cause cellular debris, which we'll get into that in a second.
Interesting. Very cool.
Cool. Yeah, thank you both for that reminder. Another use case for why it's good to look at the whole picture. And I appreciate the suggestions on the brain health apps because I feel like I spend way too much time maybe like scrolling and I could actually work my brain with something easy. I do love Sudoku. I used to Sudoku and Drive. I'm not going to do that anymore, but I'm going to get back into it.
You see my face?
Not good for your brain.
I'm a big Sudoku
I'm pretty
fan,
sure brain injuries are not good for your brain, Shannon.
You're right. I won't do it while I drive, but I am going to get back into it. I do love
Okay.
Sudoku. So,
You're giving me anxiety.
sorry. But yes, thank you. Those are all really helpful tips and the food and yes. So thank you. Moving on, we did also get some really interesting questions on things that impact brain health. So I wanted to dive into those. One question asks, I recently learned about neuroinflammation and it's tied to the immune system. Can you speak about how ongoing immune system insults impact the brain?
Yes, I can. And I have been so excited about this question because trying to talk about this in a 90-second video on the internet is really difficult. So, but interestingly enough, so everything in our body exists for a reason, right? So when you get neural inflammation, it's due to a mechanism that's being triggered, whether it's a virus or you're being exposed to mold or you've had a recent head injury, right? And then your microglia get triggered, your brain's immune system, and they go to help clean up whatever's going on, right? Regulate the cells that are getting overexcited. They try to clean up all the dead debris, cellular debris. They have a job to do that's important. Problem is when that becomes chronic. So when you pass this threshold of inflammation, these microglia start getting signals for healthy cells. which is the problem. Then they also work off of and contribute to a stress hormone called glucocorticoids, which actually can amplify this entire cyclical process. So then you get stressed out, then your brain gets stressed out, and then the stress system continues. And what it does is it starts breaking down healthy cells and then putting out signals that can actually cause, that can actually lead to things like neurofibril tangles accumulating. I mean, that's over a long period of time. I do want to be specific about that, but that's how those things occur, is then you get into these low chronic inflammatory states in your brain, and the microglia think they're still having a job to do, and it creates this like underlying stress that your brain is under. So then the inflammation never actually goes away. It kind of just rests there. So then anything can trip it up, right? You go and eat McDonald's, next thing you know, you have brain fog for 2 weeks, or you're celebratory having a glass of champagne and you get sick and nauseous and dizzy. It's like you just never, so if you're in that state, you sort of end up in a very sensitive state for the brain. So it's important that if you do experience something related to triggering inflammation, that you take care of your brain, right? And then one of the primary things that's super important is make sure you get enough sleep when this happens, because all of these toxic proteins that start building up, including the signals associated with this microglia, they get depleted and like reorganized while you sleep, right? So then they get decreased and your brain starts afresh, maybe not right away, but after a few nights, you know? So when you don't get that, it actually increases that toxic protein buildup in your brain.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm very good at sleeping, so I can handle that.
Excellent.
Yeah, thank you. So I know you talked about damaged cells. So is there a way to help the brain rid itself of dead cells?
Yeah, that's what I mean. So that's what
Okay.
they microglia have sort of the same mechanisms as macrophage, so they can actually clean up dead cells and debris. And
Okay.
so, yeah, they're very nifty little things. And they're very impressive for how
Just
small
make
they
sure
are.
taking care of those and getting enough sleep and
Yeah.
yes. Okay. Love it.
I had a question come in that I think is relevant here, which is, what aspect of sleep is most important for cleaning up the toxins, i.e. deep sleep versus REM? And I think if you could speak maybe a little bit, Sarah, to the phases of sleep and their purpose in that toxic clearing of the brain overnight. Because I mean, people hear, oh, well, you need to get deep sleep, and is REM equally important? So what's your thoughts on that?
I mean, I know this is such a non-helpful answer, but they're all important.
That's what I was gonna say. All of them.
Unfortunately, but it also matters how much, right? So if you're getting an hour to an hour and a half of deep sleep a night, that's awesome. Your brain's super happy because that allows it for your brain to actually get those moments of a rest. So REM is actually when toxic proteins get cleared. It's sort of like your stage crew, right? So all of these mechanisms that don't really get time during the day to be able to correct hyperphosphorylated proteins, all of a sudden now have the ability to, because no more signals are coming in, right? So there's no additional frequencies and oscillations happening that are triggering chemicals. So then they get a chance to do their cleanup crew thing, right? So they get to go through, do the cleanup crew stuff. And then during deep sleep, they get a rest. So it's sort of like, that's kind of how you have to look at it. So it's important to get both of them. So you can feel rested when you're awake.
Yes.
No, that makes a lot of sense.
Sleep.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm excited as a Diet Coke girly, not too much, but this question says, and you're probably going to change my mind right now.
I was already nervous about ranting about this, and now you're telling me that.
No, let it rip. But someone asked, what is the data on how or if diet sodas, aspartame, and other artificial sweeteners affect brain health? So let me know. Let me know.
Okay, so the thing with artificial sweeteners is that what they do is they actually create increased glutamate and excitatory reactions. right? So they create excitotoxicity, which is one of the things that can actually lead to that neural inflammatory and immunological response that I was just talking about. So if you, because of the fact that they do it too fast, they do it too quickly, within a short amount of time, right? So this is what can cause damage with neurons, is when you get this overexcitation flooded through these parts of your brain, the reward centers of your brain, then you can get this glutamate exhaust, right? Then your mitochondria just hate you because you're flooding their poor little system with so much calcium that they don't know how to respond. Then you get a reaction of reactive oxygen species. So it's I'm a big fan of the artificial sweeteners associated with things that are real, like plants or fruit or something like that, because then it's not a chemical process that has extra, carbons and nitrogens hiding in it that can trigger things like that. Then it's just your body's just getting normal, CHO carbon sugar out of it. The problem with regular sugar, with non-diet sodas, is that they put an extremely large amount of regular processed white sugar in it, which is a whole another thing. So it's like, I'm sorry to tell you, your middle ground is like finding a stevia soda, right?
Like Zevia. No,
Yeah.
no more diet.
I'm a big Olipop fan now. I've really
Olipop.
transitioned to Olipop. That's my
Yes.
favorite.
Or
Yeah.
Poppy. I like Poppy. Okay, I'm convinced. You convinced me.
I just wanted to clarify, Sarah, for my own, because I'm still trying to kind of make sense of that. So
Yeah.
can you talk a little bit from like the glutamate, just for our, our community who's listening here, who maybe isn't as familiar, without going too deep in the weeds, like glutamate becoming excitotoxic, right? And like why that then everything you just said has this spillover effect, too much calcium, too much stuff. What is glutamate's role in all of this?
So it's an excitatory neurotransmitter. It's a very broad one that the entire brain uses, right? So you have other excitatory neurotransmitters that sometimes are specific to regions or function, but glutamate is a very general, like, breathing and heart and eye movement, right? Like very basic things of just we're trying to trigger something to occur, right? That's why it can be sensitive, because it's a whole brain effect, right? So what happens is when glutamate gets triggered, then it causes an excitatory reaction in that post synapse, so that next neuron that's getting that signal. And when that happens, if there's too much of it, right, it gets this huge burst of it, then the cell gets overwhelmed. And but before it gets overwhelmed, it actually floods the inside of the cell with calcium, Ca2+. And mitochondria respond to this. They're very like receptive. That's how they function. They're like, oh, cool. Now we need to do all this stuff with oxygen, ATP, and it's totally normal. But if there's too much of it, then the mitochondria get exhausted. And that's what leads to reactive oxygen species.
Okay.
So getting a ton of glutamate all over your brain in one go because you drink a Diet Coke, not great.
Not ideal.
Mitochondria is upset with you right now.
I'm gonna think about my mitochondria next time I go to reach for a Diet
Yeah.
Coke. One question though is, if you have too low of glutamate, is that why we are supplementing with glutathione or NAC, or is that a separate?
It's not the neurotransmitter. Those are supportive mechanisms that can help regulate that neurotransmitter.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Okay, moving on. Let's see. We have a question from our favorite Ellen. We love her. She asks, how does exposure to mold over an extended period of time impact brain and neurological health?
So this is kind of what I was just talking about when I was talking about the microglia. So mold toxicity is a weird, slow mechanism. It can be, right? Unless you have a horrible infestation, then you're getting very sick, right? But if you have a subtle infestation and you get that mold exposure over a period of time, it can actually start to slowly break down your gray matter and your axon connections, which is your white matter. but you get gray matter atrophy from things like mold exposure because my brain just broke a little. It's trying to picture it and then to explain it at the same time.
But essentially, it's just that you have this ongoing chronic, like similar to what you're saying, chronic inflammation. So your microglia are constantly trying to clean up, and therefore you're constantly getting this neuro excitosity.
Yeah, yeah. So it's this neurotoxic cycle of like, your microglia are trying to help, but then there's this toxin, and then they try to help, but then they create a toxin, and then it's just like this repetitive cycle because you're getting that slow exposure of this toxin over time. So it's important to get that checked.
Yes. I know. Okay, next question. And I think this is really interesting and a lot of people can relate, but it was asked, I'm taking sleeping pills to help better sleep. I noticed this affects my memory. I take lion's mane to help with memory. What else would you suggest that I do or take?
Well, first off, I would try to address the underlying sleeping issue, right? Like I've already expressed, sleep is incredibly important for your brain health, especially for your memory, because memory consolidation occurs while you're sleeping. So it's important that sleep comes naturally and that it's regulated appropriately. Fixing the underlying sleep issue would then also fix the issues with your memory, because then you're not getting the same negative effects from the medication, and you're allowing your brain to naturally consolidate that memory formation. So then you don't have the same issues. And so checking on things like your hormones or your gut health, that's a big one that people, I think it's more nuanced now than it has been before, but a lot of people don't realize how much your gut affects your brain. Like that gut brain axis is just the truest thing in the universe. So
Do you want to speak? Because we actually had a question come in that says, what role does the GI system play in neurotransmitter production and brain health largely? So I think it's worth spending a little time speaking to that, because we talked about hormones and how you got to get your hormones online to be able to sleep. And then, the nutrition that follows, clearing the toxic things from your life. But gut and brain the gut brain axis is now finally sort of a buzzword that everybody recognizes. So what does that mean?
So a good specific example is serotonin. So tyrosine or tryptophan is a precursor for your body's ability to make serotonin, right? But tryptophan gets processed or serotonin gets made and processed in the gut through tryptophan. However, if you have any, and I mean any kind of gut leaking issues, you can have a dramatic decrease in your ability to produce serotonin. Serotonin isn't just a happy chemical. It also plays a huge role in your ability to stay awake during the day and go to sleep at night. Serotonin gets shut off so melatonin can be produced. If there's not enough serotonin, then you're not going to be able to produce the same amount of melatonin. So it's important that, looking at the gut for that's just one factor. There's multitudes of them. Tyrosine is a precursor for dopamine and norepinephrine, which also play a huge role in your ability to do things and be awake and function, which also follows a very similar pathway as serotonin. So it's important that if you to make sure your gut health is good, because if you're not processing and retaining those nutrients, then you're basically starting your cells at a deficit, including your brain, which takes up 20 to 30% of your nutritional daily value. Like your brain's working all the time, even if you do nothing. So got to make sure you're supplying it appropriately.
No, it's a great point. I think, the classic example, just to sort of bring it home for everybody, we see this at BLI all the time, right? And I'm sure people have either experienced this themselves or have friends, but it's like, oh, I got off dairy and my brain fog cleared. I got off gluten and I started sleeping, right? Like right there, you see that there's a reaction happening in the gut that's making its way back to the brain. Super important.
Yeah.
Well, I think to segue from that, these are all what to avoid to keep your brain healthy, right? Avoiding mold, avoiding artificial sweeteners, keeping your gut healthy, avoiding, how do you fix your sleep so you don't have to be on sleeping pills to fix your memory. What happens now if we end up in a state of a neurodegenerative disease? So we had quite a few questions about dementia and other neurodegenerative diseases. One coming to start, my husband was just diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease and Parkinson's disease. What peptides do you recommend for him? So you want to speak a little bit?
Yeah, so right off the bat, I'd say cerebralizin. It's an amazing peptide that we have here, and it's great for helping with neuroplasticity, so helping grow neuroplastic changes and maintaining healthy neurons in your brain, as well as reducing inflammatory mechanisms that could be contributing to further disease progression. The other one is something that we do specifically here at BLI, which is TB006. It's for, mild cognitive impairment, dementia, Alzheimer's, and it's something that we've been working on. The only thing that we've sort of taken a notice of is that we have to check your GAL3 levels, which I know is a foreign language, but it's basically, it's part of that immunological response that I was talking about earlier. It's one of the signals that gets produced from microglia. And so depending on what your levels are at with that will dictate how effective the TB006 is for you. And then for Parkinson's, dihexa, it's had great effects for some of our patients. And it helps kind of keep that progression or helps that progression slow down a little bit with Parkinson's.
Gotcha. Yeah, and I know we talk a lot about cerebralizin. It's one of our favorite neuropeptides, but I think we'll talk a little bit more later about that as well. This question came in, is dementia hereditary? My paternal and fraternal grandmothers both had dementia. My mother now has dementia. Am I susceptible to getting it also? I think that's a common fear of people. So how much of it is hereditary versus lifestyle?
I mean, there are specific gene mutations for all of these things. Sometimes it can be as simple as, the way that you are transcripted genetically to react to a certain protein, right? Other times it's a specific genetic marker that gets translated into something that's unhealthy and associated with Alzheimer's or dementia. But a lot of things that I have seen have to do with lifestyle, right? So it's because of those things that I was talking about, of like, if you have that low chronic inflammation, that's how you get those neurofibril tangles to start to accumulate, which over time turns into something like dementia. So it's really important to recognize that lifestyle has a huge factor on it, and it can help you avoid it even if you do have genetic mutations associated with it.
Probably
Yeah,
the most common one, sorry, just to speak to it, is probably ApoE, right? Like people are probably most familiar with that as a genetic marker of Alzheimer's, and the variance there of being a 4-4, a 3-4, increasing your risk.
Yeah. And but if you have that kind of background, or you have you have the APO or AP4 gene, then the things that you definitely need to avoid are anything that can be considered super toxic, like heavily processed foods, fast food, or alcohol, which I know is a forbidden topic for a lot of people, but it's so bad, especially if you have a risk for something like that. Alcoholic dementia is a real thing. It does lead to it. Prolonged alcohol use will cause all of these, especially because it suppresses things like GABA, which help that excitation actually regulate itself. So if alcohol suppresses GABA, then you're increasing your excitatory toxic reactions. So it's very important, especially if you know that you have this history. I would just all carcinogens.
I think, it's a great, if you have more to say, I think we should address the alcohol conversation here a little bit, because it's definitely made its way into mainstream a bit more of just truly how toxic alcohol is. And I mean, I drink and I have myself a glass of wine here and then, but ever since I've started to learn how terrible alcohol is for me, it almost like makes it not as fun. So
I'm sorry, I'm
I don't know
stealing your
if
joy.
you but I think, do you want to speak to it just a little bit more of like what's actually, you said the GABA, but like what else is happening and why is alcohol so bad for the brain?
So the thing about alcohol is that it permeates your cell membrane, right? So I was talking earlier about why cholesterol is important for membrane fluidity. Alcohol basically does instead of making it a hard shell that gets broken, it does the opposite. It starts poking holes in your cells. And so the problem with that is then you start increasing your dead cells. They start to swell. Then things like one of my not it's a horrible way to phrase that. One of my favorite mechanisms of alcohol use is just because it's so fascinating, right? Like the cell's ability to be able to do this. So your cell's reaction to it is to increase basically the dumpster of your cells that help like get rid of toxic debris or proteins or whatever. It's this little organelle called the smooth ER. So once you start drinking alcohol, that actually, the production of that inside the cell actually starts to increase. So then your cells swell because your smoothie R is now getting so large, trying to filter out all of this toxin that it completely messes up production and like your cells get stressed out and then they die. The other thing that happens when that starts, or is that will co-occur with that, is your protein production will then start to go down because your cells are utilizing so much energy trying to filter out the toxin that you're not producing enough proteins, like important signals, like hormone signals or signals associated with, or mechanisms associated with your membrane, like, different kinds of receptors that are really important. So that protein production gets shut down. So then you're at a deficit in a whole different way, right? A global deficit in your body. The thing with the brain and alcohol is that alcohol can stay in your central nervous system for up to 3 weeks. Just because yeah, it's
Oh.
yeah. So your cerebral spinal fluid is brilliant in the way that it works, but because alcohol is such a versatile blood-brain barrier chemical, it can actually chill on your cerebral spinal fluid for quite a while until it gets broken down, basically until it starts losing its efficacy. But it can move in and out of the villi in your brain just fine. So the problem with that is that for up to 3 weeks, 1 shot of ethanol alcohol is now messing with your membrane fluidity of your neurons. So that's why that's why there's no safe amount of alcohol for the brain, because even just a shot of alcohol can, break down neuronal cells or axons. So it's very important. So,
Yeah. Wow. So let me
yeah.
just summarize for my layman's brain. Basically, what happens is alcohol can cross the blood-brain barrier. It pokes holes in the cell membrane. It brings a toxic load inside of the cell. The endoplasmic reticulum, which is part of the inside cell apparatus, is trying to clear out all that toxic load. It gets stretched, it gets damaged. Everything else goes online to try and clear this toxin at the expense of your body's ability to make protein and do the other functions it needs. And because it's so slippery, for lack of a better word, it sort of cements itself inside the cells, sticks around in the cerebral spinal fluid for up to 3 weeks, constantly doing that exotoxicity. That's my new favorite word of today.
Yeah.
I like
know.
that.
So
Is that a
word.
fair recap?
Yeah, no, it's brilliant. Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks for breaking that down, Court. And I was just gonna say, for those of you who are participating in dry January, maybe you want to move now into dry February and March and April.
Eternity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a good discussion because I think people should know, what's happening. And then there is the argument of like the benefit of social interaction and being with your community and things like that. And I do respect that argument, and I think it's a good one for us to flesh out, but hopefully people are now just a little more aware. I do want to ask this question from Sandy, because we love Sandy and I love how she phrased this question. I think you kind of already answered it, but it's a good relatable question. Sandy says, why can't I remember or find the word I want to use in a sentence? It's gotten worse over the last few years. And why, when I'm carrying my keys through the house, do I get to the car and I don't have them? And I have no idea where they are or when I put them down. Thank you.
We feel you, Sandy. I feel that
Yeah.
so much.
You know, Dr. Earth and I did a talk on this a little bit ago, but there's levels of this, right? So this is actually pretty normal in somebody who has a stressed brain, right? So it doesn't necessarily mean that you're, 30 and have dementia. It just means that you might be undergoing some sort of stress. You might have an underlying gut issue that's preventing you from having serotonin actually plays a massive role in your memory. It has specific like communication with your hippocampus. So if you have gut inflammation, you have decreased serotonin, you've got memory problems, right? Like word finding, especially in that working memory up there, very difficult. That's one of the it's like one of the number one things I hear people bring up to me is they have trouble finding words. But it's important to, try to figure out if there is a underlying stress. And this could just be emotional stress, right? So it's why meditation practices, as woo-woo voodoo as they may seem, or like you don't have time for that. It's really important because it just gives, and I always tell patients, don't ever do anything over 20 minutes. I can't even sit still for 20 minutes. It's not real, but like just 10 minutes of your day of just allowing your brain to chill for a second, where it's not taking in any more information and you're not worrying about all the things, just for 10 minutes, just let it like relax. That can actually help things and help you find your keys. All of a sudden you're like, oh, I remember where I put them. Sometimes a stressed brain can act like one that has problems, right? So it's important that we understand stress plays a role in how we function in a lot of good ways, but it also has some negative impacts if it goes on for too long. It's important. Good stress management is important for things like that.
Sandy, just take a load off, kick your feet up. If you can't find your
Yeah.
keys, just hang
Do
out
some
for a second.
Just take 3 deep breaths. That's like my number one saving grace of like, if you're feeling stressed out and you get to your car and you don't have your keys and you're about to lose it, close your door, scream as loud as you can, and then just get it out. And then take 3 deep breaths in through your nose, expanding into your belly, get it nice and wide like you're pregnant, and then releasing it back out through your mouth. And do that 3 times, and then go, okay, what was I doing? And process. And sometimes that can literally make or break a day. So
Yes, I'm a huge proponent of meditation practice or breath work, yoga, whatever you have to do to manage stress. So full support here. Moving on, we received some questions about the hearing connection to the brain. Sherry was asking, what is the relationship between hearing loss and brain atrophy or degeneration? What protocol do you recommend for getting hearing exams and and supporting healthy hearing at age 50 and beyond?
So hearing loss and brain atrophy, like they go hand in hand because unless you were born deaf, hearing is a part of how we develop over time. So it's a big component on how those networks associated with your temporal region, where your ears are, actually get curated and how they get stimulated, because this is just part of being human. You hear, you process this information through those areas and so on and so forth. So as hearing loss starts to increase, what can happen is that area of the brain is now not getting the same stimulation it normally does. So then it starts to reduce its ability to function or reduce its production of things. It starts cutting off networks because it wants to conserve energy. It's just a natural part of your cells. They love conserving energy. It's their favorite thing. So they're not doing it to be harmful. They're doing it because they're like, oh, this network it's not getting enough stimulation. So we don't need to put as much effort into this region anymore. But the problem is that that's your temporal lobe region, right? It's very important with things associated with like memory, or even it can even affect the way food tastes because it's near your insula, which is part of your gustatory system. So it can actually alter things like that. So it's actually very important hearing is. And I would say supporting healthy hearing making sure that, you listen to your iPhone when it tells you that the volume is too loud. um, trying to give your hearing a break by doing activities with noise canceling headphones so that you're not getting that sort of underlying static noise on top of other things on top of it. Yeah, so it gives your hearing a little bit of a break so it's not as stressed out. Getting hearing exams for sure, especially if you have any history of like a traumatic brain injury, not an acquired brain injury, that's different, but a traumatic brain injury or blast injuries, motor vehicle accidents where glass has popped or metal has made loud sounds. Yeah, so then it's even more prominent for you to go get that checked out because you can actually have like a predisposition to hearing loss early. So it's important. And tinnitus has a lot to do with that as well.
I think too, just as an aside, we'd have to ask Dr. Yurth to confirm this, but one of the things, because when those, like the follicles in your ear start to die as you lose hearing, you can actually, if it's not too late, bring those back online. And I think cerebral iacin is actually shown that it can help with some of that rejuvenation. Don't quote me on that, but it would be.
I honestly wouldn't be surprised because a lot of things related to stuff like tinnitus has to do with frequency oscillations. Neuronal communication is why you're hearing that sound constantly. It has to do with a disruption in that communication. So cerebral iacin can help that on a neuron side, right? So from the inside, it's helping sort of help regulate that. I mean, I don't know that for sure, but it would make perfect sense to me. But I did want to mention real quick about that, the idea of hearing aids. I know it may be like something you're like, oh my God, I'm 50, I'm not going to get a hearing aid. But if you do have hearing problems and you go and get this checked out, I do recommend it because what that does is it actually helps support the opposite effect, right? So it's stimulating that part of your brain because you can hear, because you're getting all that noise. So then you're less likely to have that temporal lobe atrophying.
Yeah, it
So
makes sense. Like
don't
you
hit
keep
on
that
the ears.
temporal, you keep the temporal lobe activated because at least you can still hear versus
Yeah.
letting it die when it's not bringing in that sound stimulus.
Yes. Yeah.
Super.
Don't hate on the hearing aids. They're definitely supportive.
Hearing aids are in
Yes,
2025.
love it.
Passion. Okay, so we've talked a lot about what happens when your brain is damaged, but no fear. Let's now move into how do we heal the brain. So another one of our faves, Blaze, asked, how long does it take neural pathways to clear? And I thought that I love this question. I think it's really relevant, touches on a couple of things, but a lot of people can relate. So for example, if someone is an alcoholic or a drug addict for 10 years, how does the brain recover or it doesn't recover? Also after a traumatic event, like a death of a loved one, how long for the brain to heal? And are there any instances where the event is so traumatic that the brain cannot heal? Is there anything available to help? So thank you for this question, Blaze. I know a lot of people can relate to at least one aspect of this.
I love her. When she said this to me, I was like, this is a brilliant question. Yeah, so the benefit of neuroplasticity, the thing that I fell in love with first, is that you have it until the day you die. So even if you get regions of your brain where you have dead cells or you were an alcoholic but you stopped drinking, a death of a loved one, those glucocorticoids get like shot everywhere, right? You go through a mourning period, it can actually cause, traumatic emotional damage, which can affect the way your neurotransmitters communicate. However, because of neuroplasticity, you actually have the ability to overcome this kind of damage, right? So it's not an all or nothing, right? You don't lose it and then that's it. You can actually build more bridges, build more networks, get those areas of your brain reconnected using different pathways. And it's also important that when your brain does go through these toxic phases, right, that you take the chance to support it during the healing process. So that includes doing things like following a healthy diet with good nutrition, good balanced nutrition, making sure you're getting enough protein, making sure you're getting enough sleep, Yeah, and the biggest thing with this is patience, which is always the most difficult thing. As a TBI survivor, as well as somebody who works with people with TBIs, it can take years, which is always sometimes can feel disheartening, but it's not a bad thing. Your neurons are just, I mean, if you think about how you ended up being an adult in the first place, that curation process took decades, right? It didn't just happen overnight. So it's the same thing with the healing brain. It just requires patience, but it also needs those supportive mechanisms like good sleep and nutrition, as well as good social interaction, because laughing really is the best medicine.
Yes. Yeah, we can't rush the healing. So yeah, thanks for that question, Blaze. And I just wanted to say we love your whipped honey. We love it. Thank you.
So good. Oh my God, my boyfriend ate the entire jar.
There's a second part to this. Well, there's multiple parts, but I think for the sake of time, one that's worth touching on is the different stages, the different frequencies of the brain, right? So Blaise asked, is theta the brain frequency for healing? I know you kind of touched on this a little bit, but how do you access it and maximize healing? Why don't you just do a quick, 30-second, what are the stages of the brain, what frequencies of the brain, and kind of what each of them are about, so that we have that general knowledge.
Yeah, so delta, generally speaking, delta is involved in your sleep. Theta is your sleep wake frequency, right? So it's that transition, sort of dreamlike states. It'll pop up with imagination. It's a very transitional frequency. Alpha is relaxed but focused. And then beta is basically fixated, like you're getting that signal super hard, but beta is very quick and short. So it's quick communication between pools of neurons saying, hey, we have an activity to do. We need to do this now, right? Like moving your finger, beta activation. But theta and alpha are the ones that kind of play a role in our day-to-day as far as regulating stress, which is important. So theta is known as the healing frequency, but not because theta creates healing, but theta creates relaxation, which is the key there, right? I've been talking about stress. Yeah. So the theta frequency, what it does is it helps support your ability to de-stress, right? To lower that stress feeling, decrease those stress hormones, and actually create a situation where you can allow your brain to reset itself while you're awake, right? So if you are going to listen to binaural beats in theta or something like that, or a theta soundtrack on YouTube, try to do it while you have the ability to have a meditative state, right? Because that will actually allow that process to occur in a healthy manner. You can't just listen to this and then hope to God your brain heals. You have to put in the work, right? This is a supportive mechanism to help put in the work. So,
Got it. Cool. All right. Well, we have still many questions and not a ton of time. We're going to go over a little bit. So if people need to drop, this is being recorded. We will get it posted and shared out. I think what we could do here, and we'll just need to have another one of these to dive deeper into these questions. But I'm thinking, Sarah, why don't we do a little rapid fire round on supplementation?
Okay.
And we'll just sort of, I'll throw out a supplement that we've talked about or that maybe people have heard, but we haven't talked about yet today. Give us the 2 cents on it to the best of your ability. And we'll kind of go quick through them, and then we can obviously dive deeper in the future. So we spoke about cerebrolizin, so we'll skip over that one. It's a neuropeptide. We do it IV typically at the clinic. Somebody did ask about oral cerebrolizin. It is available kind of online. It doesn't have as much research and support behind it as the IV version. So we only offer the IV. There's a cycling to it. I don't know, what's the typical sort of dosing schedule for cerebro?
So in a general sense, like if you're just doing it for brain health as a neuroprotective situation, then you would do our loading dose, which is 5 days in a row, right? And then you can do that every 3 to 6 months if you want, or even a year, 3 to 6 months. But that's, I would say, is a general sense. When it comes with something related to specific diagnosis, like either dementia, Alzheimer's, traumatic brain injury, then we do the loading dose for 5 days, and then we'll see you every other week or every 2 weeks for a single IV infusion. And then that will be a maintenance dose for, I don't know, about 6 months to a year.
Okay. All right. Plasmalogens. Probably people have heard Betsy talk about plasmalogens, omegas, that kind of thing. What are plasmalogens and why are they important?
So plasmalogens are, I always think of them as like a precursor to omegas, right? Threes, sixes, and nines. But the reason why plasmalogens are so awesome is because they're basically phospholipids, which is what your cell's membrane is made of. So speaking of what alcohol can do, in recovery, plasmalogens are brilliant at being able to overcome those poked holes in your membrane. It also helps support membrane fluidity as well as cell signaling, and just keeping your cells in a healthy state so that they can actually take on our daily stresses. So they're really good as supportive, but they're also really good for a healing brain. Very good, highly recommend. And that's kind of why they also help keep a balance between omega-3s, 6s, and 9s, which is really important. Sometimes when people take too many omega-3s, we see this like imbalance where all of a sudden they have like no omega-6s or really low omega-9s. Even though their omega-3s are great. So plasmalogens kind of divert that accidental ratio tip.
Gotcha. And then just to speak briefly to it, the difference between prodrome neuro and prodrome glia, because people who are familiar with plasmalogens may have taken prodrome products. Are there kind of different purposes and why do they serve different roles?
So prodrome neuro is more like, here are the tools to help you build the house, right? It's supportive in a natural day-to-day function. It's a general blanket, right? The prodrome glia is not just the tools, but the, shingles, the wood, and the workers. So it helps actually build the house with you. And the other thing that's really nice about it is it helps regulate your synapses. So they're like little claws around your synaptic communication. They help regulate and process all the different neurotransmitters. They can actually get affected when you do have excitotoxicity. And so prodrome glia helps prevent that damage to those glia and help regulate that communication to decrease excitotoxicity. So it's really awesome for that too.
Awesome.
Mhm.
All right, what about exogenous ketones? I know those have been pretty popular in the market, and there's definitely a lot of different types, but what are ketones and what do they do for the brain?
So ketones are sort of an alternative, we'll say an alternative energy source. Most people think when you think energy in the cell, you think glucose. So the glucose is great for quick energy, right? But like we've discussed, that excitotoxicity, it's not great. That can actually cause even more problems. So we don't want that quick energy. We want that long-lasting energy, and that's what those ketones are good for, is their long-lasting clean energy. And they help de-stress your mitochondria, which is awesome, right? Because they're not using the same pathway as that glucose is. So then your mitochondria actually gets a break. You get less reactive oxygen species. It's very helpful. So I always think of it as, you're trying to sustain yourself through the day versus you're going to just quickly take a, shot of sugar and get through something, right? So it's good for the brain for multiple reasons because it helps regulate that process. It's an alternative energy source than glucose, so then it doesn't cause more damage like excitotoxicity. And it also has electrolytes, which are incredibly important. We always say drink enough water, and I feel like nobody talks about how important just daily electrolytes are. So
Right,
really
that actually
important.
have the balance in your water.
Yeah.
No, that makes sense. And I think the one other thing, just because I've done a good amount of research on ketones, is they can cross the blood-brain barrier. So they're a readily available brain energy, not just, whereas glucose has to go through all of these, different processes to turn into ATP. Ketones skip, like you said, a lot of those steps. So they're much more readily available, especially to the brain.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
What about creatine and the brain?
So creatine's awesome. It's actually one of my favorite things that I love to recommend to people, well, specifically to people that are my fighters who get, hit in the face a lot. don't like it, but it's a neuroprotective agent, and it also helps with cognition, which is really awesome. So taking daily creatine, 5 to 10 grams a day, it can help with cognitive function. It can help with daily energy. It's a great neuroprotective support mechanism. If you are a fighter or play football, doing
You just get in
20,
fights with your siblings. I don't know.
yeah, right. Anywhere where you're going to get your head hit repeatedly, do 25 milligrams 4 times a day, right? So 20 milligrams a day prior to that event. Your throwdown, with the pillows here.
All right, and then, oh, sorry.
No, you're fine. Go ahead.
All right, we'll talk quickly here too about a couple other peptides. So we talked about dihexa, we talked about cerebro. What other peptides are there kind of in the brain health realm that people could be aware of?
So Cmax and C-Link, which I know sound the same, but the benefit, so they're neuroprotective, neurotropics, and they're very good for supporting brain health over time. They're also good for anti-anxiety and antidepressant. So I definitely recommend those if you struggle with that, because sometimes that can be a more natural way to help support that entire mechanism. Reducing your anxiety, reducing your stress, making sure you're feeling good about the day, good neuroprotective peptides, and don't require an IV. So.
Yeah, I know as a personal share, my sister who has a lot of anxiety, she's found a lot of help with Cmax and C-Link, and I feel like those have been really helpful just for our anxiety patients and people who are in that high-strung state to just chill.
Yeah.
Do you use them together, or can you use one or the other? Or do you usually do them together?
One or the other. I don't know, to be honest with you. I don't think I've ever seen it together. It's always one or the other.
Oh, okay.
Good
And their
question.
nasal spray, which is nice.
Yeah.
All right, Sharon, you want to bring us home with our final questions here? Appreciate everybody sticking with us, but we had a lot of questions and it's too good of content to stop early.
Absolutely. Yeah, this has been really good. We've talked a lot about treatment options, but really quick, let's just go over how people can come work with us at BLI and what we use to measure brain activity and track our brain health. I know we have a lot of options here, but yeah, so how can people work with us?
So that's like my bread and butter, and Chuck is representing today. We have this thing called the WAVi. It's basically like if Apple made an EEG machine. But I use that to help measure the health of your brain as well as map your brain, which is really important, because if you are coming to see me for something related to mild cognitive impairment all the way to Alzheimer's or Parkinson's, I can use this map of your brain to do specific therapy and functional neurotherapy that's specific to you, so that you can overcome these deficits as you progress through this, these issues. But the benefit of WAVi and the way that I kind of manipulate things and make this beautiful little map is I can also look at how your brain is communicating between these networks, in what frequency, which, like we discussed, is important. And it helps me better understand, areas of your brain that might not be getting enough oxygen, that might be suffering from a metabolic problem that due to something like mold exposure. These things get brought up while I'm doing this scan. So it helps me also helps me and helps you identify where there might be a problem and how we can go about helping you fix that problem. And then it will also help me track your progress through whatever protocol we put you on. So we can actually see how your brain is healing through all of these processes, which I think is so fun.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and I've had a WAVi scan. It was actually with Sarah very relaxing. So
yeah, I remember you were so serene when you did it. You're like, oh, that's great.
It's really nice.
And I think what's cool about WAVi is that it also gives you that both power and connectivity, right? Like you can get some power measurements, how well like your brain is actioning, and then also all the connectivity. And that's one thing Sarah does really well, is she's got, some crazy spreadsheets that she looks at that call out what literal, parts of your brain are talking to other parts of your brain more strongly and more and less strong, right? What parts are not working together.
Yeah, it's my favorite part, actually. I'm not gonna lie. I love that. I love seeing how that ratio and how vibrant areas of your brain are communicating, and so fascinating to me. I love it.
And did you speak, do you want to go in just a little bit more about kind of how then you structure a neurofeedback session with people and what that looks like for somebody after they've got their brain mapped and the baseline?
Yeah, so once I get everything, kind of worked out and I can see what areas of your brain are struggling, I can use your map to actually, as a map and find a little pathway to be able to get to that same region. Basically help curate a neuroplastic change so that you don't lose whatever that brain region is responsible for, like word finding or language comprehension, right? So I find these little alternative pathways because I can see the healthy communication, the healthy networks. So I find ways to utilize those healthy networks to get to the same source. And then that way, as we go through therapy, you actually can I wouldn't say more quickly, but more efficiently develop those plastic changes that will help sort of either maintain or regrow those skills you may have lost for whatever reason, whether it was a brain injury or toxic exposure, etc.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, to bring us home, George asked this question, and I think it's a good summary question just to leave everybody with your final 2 cents. He said, I'm interested in what I can do to support long-term brain health. So if you had to kind of recap everything we talked about today and your guiding light to people as they leave this session and go off into the world, what do you have to just keep in the back of your mind to keep your brain functioning long and healthily?
So the basic big 3, which is sleep, nutrition, and exercise. I know it seems so basic and so simple, but I think especially, here with our little peptide clinic, it gets lost in translation sometimes. And I just cannot tell you how beneficial just those natural occurring things are for your brain on a daily basis. And you don't even have to exercise big. Courtney knows I'm a huge advocate for the 30-minute walk. As long as you get that bilateral swing in, I'm all about it, right? It's brilliant for your brain. 30 minutes a day, just being able to allow your brain to get that sort of flush of exercise. And nutrition, real food, good health. Don't hate on the animal fat. Butter is amazing. It's delicious. But good healthy fats, good protein sources, like sustainable grass-fed protein sources, and making sure you're getting, I personally, as your neuroscientist, would prefer if you got 7 to 8 hours of sleep, but 6 to 8 is okay too. Anything less than that, and you're breaking into that whole deep sleep 1 hour to 1.5 hours. So those are my broad recommendations for longevity of your brain.
To tell me twice about the sleeping. I will do that. Check in. Check.
I'll just eat butter. It'll be great.
Butter, yes.
Oh, God, but it's so good. I love butter.
Yeah. And thank you for that reminder too, because I know that we do have so many things that we can offer here. But don't forget to do the little things that are available to everyone, so everyone can exercise and eat well and sleep.
Yeah, awesome. And just because it popped in and just to kind of leave everybody with this, just like Sarah said, there are big 3 things that you don't really need BLI to do. Go do those. We can help you with a lot of the next level, the deeper dive. If you are local and you live in Boulder or nearby, we would love, to come meet you and do a WAVi scan and potentially some of the other neurofeedback training. If you're not local and you live across state lines and somewhere further away, Sarah, could you do neurofeedback via telehealth? Is that something that is an option, or would that be a little too tricky?
Yes, and I've been trying to develop that because especially in the winter, because we're in Colorado and the roads have been especially icy this year, which is not my favorite. I've been trying to develop a protocol associated with that that's a little bit more friendly because it is important. I hate when patients miss therapy sessions because of weather. So it kind of depends on, your scan, right? It's patient specific, but I can provide some of it.
Good talk. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think if you are looking for a WAVi and you're not here in Boulder, shoot us a message through the portal and we can probably help you find a provider or somebody in your area who has it. It's not super prolific, I don't think. So it may be a little tricky. We also always love having people come visit us. So you can come, you can do a deep dive brain session, get a whole bunch of services while you're here. But
And Courtney, really quick, if we have audience members who aren't clients with us, how can they reach us if they want? Because we want to know
Yeah.
feedback. What did you like? What do you want to see more of?
Great.
Any questions? Yeah.
Yeah, so if you guys aren't currently BLI clients, you may have heard about us through our academy, so you may be Human Optimization Academy members. If you are neither a BLI client or Human Optimization Academy member, definitely join our academy. That's where a lot of this content lives. You just go to bli.academy. This is where this recording will be posted. We have our other recordings from that we've done Q&As with our other staff members, our ortho and our CCCs. And then if you want to see us at the clinic, just go to boulderlongevity.com and put in an inquiry and let us know you're interested in brain health or whatever it might be. And we are going to keep trying to do these Q&As. Our team is growing. We have a lot of smart people. I mean, we really have probably 15 more questions here that we didn't get to with Sarah. So we'll probably have to do another one of these in the not too far future. So as always, just shoot us a message if you have any other questions or other things you'd want to see. But I think anything I missed, Shannon?
I was just gonna say follow Sarah on Instagram, SJ Hearts, follow Boulder Longevity Institute and Dr. Worth, and we'll post tons of stuff there. And thank you so much for all your questions. They were so good.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, guys. I had so much fun. Thank you for letting me talk about brain stuff.
Yes, yes. Thanks for being here, Sarah. And that's all we have.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a good one.
Bye.